Hello again, BookTube. Books with Banks back again with another Kharkanas analysis video. If you haven't seen my first analysis video that titled Who is Just and Who is Just Self-Righteous, please check that out as well, especially if you're interested in themes of justice and people trying to figure out or find worthy causes to fight for. But for this video, we're going to be focusing on the parent-child relationships Erikson has woven throughout Forge of Darkness, Book 1 of the Kharkanas trilogy. I will be spoiling about 3 different storylines from Forge of Darkness, but I won't spoil anything from Book 2 of the trilogy, Fall of Light, nor will I spoil anything from the main 10-book series, Malazan Book of the Fallen, and I won't be mentioning anything from the Esselmont books either. So my hope is that this video will inspire more conversation about how Erikson plays with the theme of parental responsibility. Much has been said about a character like maybe the Mahib in Memories of Ice. Much has also just been said in general about children moving away from and growing away from the parents throughout the main 10-book series, Book of the Fallen. So now I'm taking this chance to follow those themes with Erikson into his prequel trilogy. If you enjoy the video, please like, subscribe, share with your friends, and if you have anything to add or counter, as always, please comment down below. Strap in and enjoy. So, introduction. Or actually, the title of this essay is Parental Responsibility, the Lessons Parents Pass On to Their Children in Steven Erikson's Forge of Darkness. Introduction. When I first read Forge of Darkness by Steven Erikson, I kept thinking to myself about all of the one-on-one parental character-child character dynamics Erikson was presenting me with. I was perhaps a little too wrapped up in deciphering the denser language, and I was also too enraptured with the tense, dramatic, tragic storytelling. Too enraptured with all of that to do much analysis of these parent-child relationship dynamics on my first read. I have since returned to the novel, and I've returned to analyze these dynamics to grasp a better understanding of how the different relationships included work to complement and contrast each other in enlightening ways. I've selected 3 particular relationships to review in this essay, though it should be noted here that these are only a small selection of all the possible parent-child relationships one could pick out to analyze from the 2 existing books in Erikson's Kharkanas trilogy. I've decided to narrow my focus in this essay to just 3 fairly explicit relationships, and these 3 are all ones in which the parental figure is a father. I may choose to focus on the mothers and their children in a future analysis video. I will first be exploring the messages and significance of the relationship between Draconis and his son Erethan. Draconis is a mysterious Teist lord, the Teist being the people ruling Kharkanas civilization, the epic fantasy setting and society at the heart of these novels. And he, Draconis, is in love with Mother Dark, the current ruler in Kharkanas. Draconis is traveling into the lands of the Azathanai, and these are essentially bickering demigods interfering with high society and the fabric of the physical reality and magical elements in the world. Draconis has brought with him on his journey his son, Erethan, a quiet boy many had deemed weak and an unworthy successor to this great and mysterious Lord Draconis, but Erethan possesses many mysteries in and of himself. So these 2 begin their journey into foreign lands in the company of a protective troop of border swords. These are essentially their bodyguards. Erethan's mean-spirited and cruel tutor, Sagander, also accompanies them. More will be said, though, on Sagander in a future video essay. So that's the first relationship. The next relationship explored will be that of Haut and Koria. Haut is a Jaghut, living for the most part in isolation, as is the contemporary Jaghut way of life. This Haut character, however, does still participate in one important Teist cultural tradition, and that is the tradition of hostage-taking to keep the peace. In this society, in these books, these greater and lesser households and noble families will essentially trade children to be raised in the households of others, so as to be these sort of hostages, still treated well and raised as children and friends or adopted children and step-siblings in most cases. The nobility are less likely to attack their peers if those other households might be raising their children, or if you know, a current ruler of one household previously had grown up befriending and in the keeping of another household. So while this is the general idea of this nonviolent sort of deterrence-based hostage system, Haut, the Jagut, a race a little bit outside of Teist culture, Haut is manipulating the situation slightly for his own means. He has been given the hostage Coria Delath, and he is making something like a vessel out of her. While his goals with Coria, his adopted daughter, are mysterious and concerning, their relationship between these two and this mentor-pupil dynamic here is one of the more fascinating of the whole novel and one worth a deeper analysis. Throughout the book, they are on a journey to visit another Jagut by the name of the Lord of Hate. So that's it for the second relationship we'll be looking at. Lastly, and least as far as content available to analyze, are the characters of Osirk and Urusander. And Osirk is a character readers of Malazan Book of the Fallen might recognize. Vatha Urusander is a war hero, legion commander, and he and his followers, while explicitly they seek to have him wed to Mother Dark eventually, implicitly, many of Urusander's followers and officers, many of them seek to sow chaos and ignite a civil war. Urusander's son, Osirk, both criticizes and admires his father and the ways in which his father is coping with this political situation. Now, compared to the other two relationships above, this one receives far less page time. However, there are unique elements to their interactions that will help tie the analysis of parenting back in with the analysis of justice from the first video, and analyzing their relationship will also help shed some light on the other two, by contrast. Finally, this essay seeks to explore what lessons parents intentionally and unintentionally pass down to their children, and how those children are molded to view the world in all of its complexity through the lens of everything passed down. Part 1, Erethan and Draconis. Erethan and Draconis are two of the most important characters in Forge of Darkness, both in the sense of the plot but also the themes. As they journey west into the lands of the Azathanai, their father-son relationship develops in unexpected ways, as they both learn to understand each other more personally and deeply than they ever had before. In Erethan's initial view of his father, he recalls Draconis saying, quote, "It may be that you will believe I do not want you," end quote. And then to himself, Erethan thinks, "But you don't. Instead, you pass me off on whomever you choose." The others to which Erethan refers to are his tutor, Sigander, and one of the Border Sword bodyguards accompanying them, a woman named Farron. Draconis has tried to get Farron to at least befriend his son, though there's a little bit more to it than that. And this is an important moment in which Erethan has succinctly summarized his frustration with the distance his father keeps putting between the two of them. Shortly thereafter, however, Erikson gives readers the first glimpse of Draconis learning to respect his son. The cruel tutor mentioned before, Sigander, he has just gotten in a physical altercation with Erethan after Erethan chose to criticize his father. Erethan claims that he is his father's weakness, and in so doing poses interesting questions about familial relationships. Are all children considered weaknesses by their parents? Has Draconis been distracting himself has Draconis been distancing himself from Erethan to limit the impact of that weakness? We will return to this point further down. For the moment, however, in this moment, scolding Sigander, Draconis states, "Tutor, hear me well. I do not need you to defend my honor. Furthermore, the boy was correct. If anything, he was to be commended for his acuity. Finally, Erethan has shown me something I can respect." End quote. So even though Sigander thought he was defending his lord's honor, Draconis still chooses to admonish the tutor and respect his son. Draconis elaborates on his state of mind further on in this chapter, in a passage that at this point is one of the lengthiest exchanges we get between father and son. Quote, You wondered if you were my weakness, Erethan? There is no dishonor in that question. How could there be? The matter concerns your life, after all. Is it not your right to wonder at your place in the world? Furthermore, it was perceptive, and this encourages me. Until now, there is little that has impressed me about you. Tell me, do you imagine your gnawing upon your fingers well suits the man you have become? This habit has even damaged your ability with the sword, and should it continue, Erethan, it may well see you killed. End quote. So in this way, Draconis has imparted two valuable lessons to his son. The first was more unintentional and more to do with the father's reaction to events outside of his control and his reaction to his son's critical remarks. The second was more an intentional lesson in which the father is, in a way, assuming his rightful place once again, this time being the one doing the criticizing, pointing out Erethan chewing on his fingers, or on his fingernails. Let us jump ahead now to a point in time after Erethan has undergone traumatic and emotional events of his own. By this point, Erethan has slept with a woman, the aforementioned Farron border sword. He has fallen in love with her, and he has also come to realize that she was using him in her own way. As far as this narrative goes, Erikson presents these as significant moments in Erethan's emotional development. The boy eventually impregnates Farron, and Draconis is about to send the border swords, including Farron, away from the two of them. In this moment, we are presented with Erethan for the first time thinking more along the lines that a parent might think. Draconis explains that the border swords, quote, are no longer needed. This statement makes Erethan think, and somewhere ahead you will leave me behind too, no longer needed. And then he asks, Father, don't hurt her. Hurt who? Asks Draconis. And Farron, whispered Erethan. And the child she carries. My child, he thought to himself. And then he asks, just leave them alone, please. This is the first instance in which Erethan has been forced to think about the protection of his child, and to protect that child, he asks his father to leave the child and the mother of the child alone, an echo of how Draconis had pretty much left Erethan alone for most of his life, setting up barriers to possibly protect his son instead of avoid his son as a weakness. So through his own demands, Erethan is demonstrating lessons he has internalized, and he is pointing out that a father can be both afraid of his child and afraid for his child. And then concluding this chapter of Erethan's emotional development, Erikson writes the following inner monologue from the young man's point of view. Quote, he had stood up to his father. He had made a demand even if it had sounded like a plea. A true son knew to draw lines in the sand and claim what he would for himself, for his own life and all that he deemed important in it. This was what growing up meant. Places to claim, things owned, and things defended. It was a time of jostling, because the space was never big enough for the both of them, for both father and son. There was pushing and there was pulling, and comfort went away if it had ever existed, but maybe someday it would come back, if the father permitted it, if the son wanted it, if neither feared the other. End quote. So Erethan has learned much on his journey by this point, but it seems the primary lesson he has learned is that the father-son relationship is more of a power struggle, all motivated by fear. On one hand, this is a sad lesson to learn, setting up this relationship as a contest instead of a partnership. Yet on the other hand, Erethan has been able to grow more confident in himself and his own worldview, no matter how molded that worldview has been by his father. And this self-confidence and his sense that he has to inherit the responsibilities of control and power, those are all relatively valuable and positive lessons. At the end of this section in the book, Erethan admits something to Draconis that likely disturbs Draconis. Erethan admits that after everything he has gone through with Farron and all the lessons he has learned thus far, he, quote, no longer believes in love. While the reader is in Erethan's perspective here, it is not lost on us that Draconis might have calloused his son a bit too much, for now Erethan has grown even more skeptical and hardened than his father, a father for whom readers will recognize and know at this point has been embarking on this whole quest for the sole purpose of love, or at least what Draconis considers to be love, and now this is the very thing his son has just sworn off. Moving forward now to near the end of their journey together, Draconis remarks, It is the failure of every father to impart wisdom to his child. No paint adheres to sweating stone. You are too eager, too impatient, and too quick to dismiss the rewards of someone else's experience. End quote. This statement is frustrating from a character analysis standpoint. Draconis has never before explicitly displayed this level of ignorance for the internal and emotional journey his son has gone on over the course of the book so far, and Draconis seems to be sweeping their differences aside with a statement akin to our world's idiom of youth is wasted on the young, or something like that. I personally would argue that Draconis is missing the point when he states that Erethan is dismissing, quote, the rewards of someone else's experience. First of all, imparted wisdom and lessons, or life lessons, and lessons of life experience, are not necessarily always rewards that the young should be happy to receive. And secondly, I believe Erethan has proven that regardless of whether or not he wishes to dismiss these rewards, all of Draconis' life experience and lessons have still had a profound impact on Erethan, whether he wanted them to or not. Draconis credits Erethan with too much agency in this matter. For that matter, neither has as much control or agency over the lessons passed down as both would like to believe, at least that the other one does have. Finally, we get a glimpse, not what Erethan has learned from his father, but what he has learned about his father. Knowing now that Draconis is seeking out a gift of power to give to Mother Dark, his true love, Erethan bitterly reflects on and pities his father's worldview. Quote, he thinks love is a toy, he thinks it shines like a bauble, and he makes every gesture a demand seeking love in return. Therefore, each and everything that he does must be a thing of many meanings, but he does not understand that this is his private language, this game of bargaining, and the amassing of debts no one else comprehends. I begin to understand the many lives of my father, and in each guise new flaws are revealed. I once vowed to hurt him if I could, a foolish conceit. Draconis knows nothing but hurts. End quote. Above there, Erethan has demonstrated his ability to refrain from judging his father too harshly, as many children might do of their parents. And Erethan has also been able to connect that whereas Draconis' gift to Mother Dark is a physical, magical artifact called a Turandai in this world, Draconis' gifts to Erethan have been these lessons, and this time together, and all of this time together, on this journey, for which Erethan could never begin to understand how to repay his father for. Please note also that Erethan compares these gifts to toys, for this will be a significant point of connection later. And at the very end of their time together, quote, no embrace, no words of love to seal this farewell. He is gone, my father is gone. Erethan stood alone, feeling lost, feeling free. And this is how this father and son dynamic concludes. Now, moving on to part 2, this is the Haut and Coria section of the essay. While Coria, the hostage/adopted daughter of Haut, is being used by her father for a vague, magical purpose, the two have a relatively congenial relationship. All throughout their journey, Haut is mentoring her on the ways of civilization, the ways of this world's more magical elements, and a number of other scholarly areas of interest. When we are first introduced to Coria, we learn that she has a collection of dolls. This is a situation many readers will be able to connect with, and one that immediately invokes a sense of youth, playfulness, and possibly even immaturity. But for one raised in the extremely bizarre conditions Coria has been raised in, these dolls hold even more symbolic weight for her, and they will be a symbol Erikson uses throughout the book to help comment on growth and a child's passage from childhood into adulthood. Quote, not too many years ago, fewer indeed than she cared to think about, Coria Delath had lived in another age. The sun had been brighter, hotter, and when she had carried her dolls, a dozen or more, up the narrow, treacherous stone steps to the Ares platform, She had delivered them into that harsh light with breathless excitement, for this was their world, cut clean with the low walls enclosing the platform, casting the barest of shadows, and the heat rising from the stone was lifted up by the summer wind as if giving voice to a promise. Up here in that lost age, it ever seemed she was moments from unfolding wings, moments from sailing up into the endless sky. She was a giant to her dolls, a goddess, and hers were the hands of creation, and even without wings she could stand and look down upon them, reaching to adjust their contented positions, tilting their faces upward so that she could see their stitched smiles or surprised "oh" mouths, and their bright-knuckled eyes of semi-precious stones, garnet, agate, amber, that gleamed and flashed as they drank in the fervent light. The summers were longer then, and if there were days of rain, she did not remember them. From the eyrie, she could look out and study the vast world beyond her and her dolls, her little hostages. So immediately, much more quickly than in the case of Erethan and Draconis, we are thrust into the mindset of a child not only growing up and reflecting on the beauty and wonder of childhood, but also she's considering the perspective that parents have of their children. Unlike Erethan, however, Coria has taken her thoughts on parenting to another level, comparing the control of a parent to that of a god or goddess, as she would liken herself as a god or goddess to these dolls. Perhaps she would liken herself as a parent to these dolls as well. Moments later, her introspection returns to these dolls. She considers, quote, "Her dolls remained in her room these days. It had been years since they had last looked up at the sun in its sky with their O mouths and eternal smiles. Sometimes the world dwindled down until it was no bigger than a small, shallow platform atop a tower, and a goddess ran out of games to play, gave up reaching down to adjust the posture of her insensate children. Sometimes the hostages just died of neglect, and power over corpses was no power at all." End quote. Coria's thoughts here have taken a grim turn as she compares her loss of youth and innocence to the neglect her dolls must surely feel, if they were actually capable. If parents were gods to their children, and through neglect effectively were killing their children, then parents in so doing would be losing all of their power, at least according to Coria's conclusion above. This grim idea would suggest that Coria, at least at this point in time, believes a parent only has control over their children when the children are happy and sort of ignorant of what might be their prison. All that being said, Hout has not been hiding these truths or ideas from Coria. He has not hidden that she is, in a way, a hostage, in a way, a prisoner of his. If anything, he encourages her in her critical thinking, no matter how strained that critical thinking might make their father-daughter relationship. Now, I have thus far hinted a couple times that Hout is using and manipulating Coria for a very specific purpose. In their next scenes together, about a third of the way through the book, Hout and Coria are discussing gods and goddesses with the ways of violent civilization. Coria begins to remember these sort of distorted scenes and ideas, reflections, this collection of vague memories, when suddenly she thinks to herself, quote, "Mahib, the vessel waiting to be filled, trunk of dolls, reach in quickly now, choose one, upon your life, choose one," end quote. So in her panicked, distorted collection and flood of memories here, it can be difficult to pick apart what is and isn't symbolically and thematically significant. However, what should be noted is that she considers herself the keeper and parent and goddess of her dolls. She now is starting to understand what a Mahib is, and she pities and panics about the isolation and abandonment she has left her dolls in. A reader might be asking themselves if Coria has been turned into this Mahib vessel, a vessel to carry numerous souls in the same way the trunk back in her room in that tower carries those numerous soulless dolls. Is this a magical and wondrous thing her father has made of her, or is it more a manipulative and cruel thing? Is this similar to one of Draconis' misplaced gifts or lessons of love, or is it something else entirely? And on the point of gifts, What lessons has Hout unintentionally taught Coria about such things? Later on, Coria proposes, quote, "There are many virtues that cannot be measured in a material manner," to which Hout says, "Indeed, name one," and she answers, "Love." Hout is not convinced and so lists off a reductive group of synonyms in his mind of love. He says, quote, "Torques and rings of gold, brooches and diadems, expensive gifts, a solid home, and a roof that does not leak, a child," end quote. This conversation eventually turns into the two basically agreeing that virtues are unique and can be independent of certain material possessions people often apply to those virtues. And then from there, the conversation delves into things like greed and how greed and wealth are intertwined concepts. Essentially, the conversation falls away from the idea of love and gift giving, which is most important for this analysis. Now, one should take that scene to recognize echoes here of what Draconis considers to be, or considers love to be, and how critical Erethan was of his father's limited view on the subject. Yet when Hout and Coria discuss such things as love and gift-giving, they do so in a manner of mutual respect, building off of the other's ideas and theories, never considering anything absolutely true or false, and certainly never making any absolute determinations on each other's character. Near the end of their journey, they begin a debate similar to the intellectual conversations they have been having throughout the entire book. Coria asks, "You would engage an ill-tempered woman in debate, master?" Hout responds, "True, woman you are, child no longer. Well, as I am bored, I will gird my armor and march into the perilous ferment of a woman's fury." Coria then thinks to herself, she so wanted to dislike him, but again and again it proved impossible. In other words, the lesson learning in this relationship, whether those lessons, again, are intentional or not, all of this happens in a healthy environment of mutual respect in which both father and child feel comfortable to raise such questions and have fruitful, healthy debates about such things. The same could not be said for Erethan and Draconis' relationship, nor could you say this about the final relationship we're going to cover here. Okay, part 3, Osirk and Urusander. While Vathar Urusander is one of the more politically significant father figures analyzed here, his son Osirk only appears a couple times throughout the entire book, and even less frequently in Fall of Light, the sequel. That being said, this father-son relationship helps to tie together some of the ideas of respect and gift-giving already reviewed in the two relationships above. Osirk is first properly introduced more than halfway through the novel in conversation with a young woman from the town, a woman named Renar. He initiates the encounter by asking her, "Do you know who I am?" Eventually she answers, "You are Lord Urusander's son," to which he thinks to himself, by any measure her respect was less than satisfying, verging on insult. If this encounter and Osirk's reaction to Renar's harmless statement seems odd, Erikson has intentionally made it so. Already Erikson has painted a young man who would use his father's importance to both bolster his own importance, yet at the same time Osirk is cautious and uncomfortable about being associated with his father, Urusander. It is clear only a few pages later just how much of his father's worldview Osirk has inherited. If you will recall from the previous essay on justice and moralizing, Urusander was in a nearly constant state of self-doubt, wondering how to justify his actions, and wondering how virtuous his reality really was compared to his larger-than-life persona. Now, here with Osirk, we see a character who has suffered/experienced more directly than any other probably, the power of that larger-than-life persona of his father. After bedding Renar, he explains, just to calm her nerves, he explains, quote, "And you need never fear otherwise. As proof of that, I insist that you call me Osirk. I am my father's son, and we are humble before what modest privileges our family possesses. Indeed, we take most seriously our responsibilities, which seems to be too rare a virtue among the highborn. But then, we are not highborn, are we? We are soldiers, that and nothing more," end quote. Osric would use his status and powerful position to encourage a woman to sleep with him, but then he would defend his and his family's honor by saying they are just as common people, and common people are good and virtuous, where the nobles are not. I would argue that Erikson is making a statement here about how often vain young men will hold to their hypocritical convictions, not yet understanding how much of an impact these ideas might actually have on the world and the people they're talking to, thinking themselves still living in the shadows of their elders, of their fathers. Furthermore, Erikson would probably argue that Osric feels protected from the outside world by the long shadow his father casts atop his high place of respect among the common people. So at the end of the scene, after Renard admits, honestly or not, quote, "I am glad, my lord, that it was you," end quote, as in she is glad that she lost her virginity to him, Osric thinks to himself, he heard her hesitation halfway through her confession and knew that she had almost voiced his name, but in the wake of what they had done, a new fragility had arrived, and Osric knew enough to say as little as possible. He did not want this peasant girl walking up to the keep, belly distended, and shouting out his name. His father would take her in, if only to spite his son. Things would get complicated, end quote. So here, Osric is wondering if this random act of passion would be used against him by his father in some way, should the girl become pregnant. If his father would use this in some way to try and teach him a lesson. And Osric is clearly drawing a line between the lessons his father intends to teach him and those he doesn't. More simply put, on the one hand, Urisander had taught his son that they really were in fact more powerful and of a higher social status than the common people, and Urisander loathed that he had sort of accidentally taught this to Osric, to his son, that he had unintentionally helped Osric draw these conclusions. Then on the other hand, Urisander actually did intend to teach his son about things like modesty, respect, responsibility, all lessons Osric had no time for. And the quote above demonstrates that Osric is callously aware of this distinction between what his father wants him to interpret from his position of power and what Osric is actually learning from Urisander's position of power. But Osric is simply just callously aware and indifferent to that distinction. Later, in direct conversation with his father, Osric is trying to convince Urisander to raise the banners of the Legion and join the fray of Teist factions in this mounting pre-Civil War power struggle. Osric expects and dreams of the days when he will inherit his father's lofty Osric expects and dreams of the days when he will inherit his father's lofty position of this command, so he desperately wishes his father would continue to prove to all of Kharkanas how powerful the Legion actually is. And his father claims, you are not ready. Osric responds, in your eyes I will never be ready. And eventually he asks, what must I do to convince you? He then thinks to himself that he hates the weakness in his own tone. So rage as he might against his father's indecision and humility, Osric still has to admit that he needs his father's respect. And in this exchange, we can see that there is rarely understanding between the two of them. And when there is, no respect accompanies that understanding. There exists no respect here for the gifts or lessons passed down from the father, and no respect for the son trying to make a name for himself. In this relationship, both father and son will only respect each other once the other starts behaving as his opposite. And from there, no healthy growth or development can be found. Erikson writes, quote, uncomprehending, Osric shook his head. Will you keep your only son beneath the respect of everyone, your own soldiers? Why? Why do that to me? And if I make you commander of the Legion, you will have all the respect you so need? Yes. Urisander had turned back to the window. He now reached up and rubbed a smudge on the frail glass. By title and the burden of responsibility, you will find all you yearn for. You will find this respect you've heard so much about from old veterans and drunk fools, from the poets and what you think you see upon the wood panels so finely brushed into likenesses, from historians and other whores of glory, end quote. These two clearly do not understand one another, and therefore can have no real fruitful conversations or the passing back and forth of any kind of lessons to be learned, as was something that was possible, seen in both of the two relationships studied above. So in the end, Sander admits exactly what he wants for his son and exactly how he wants his son to reflect his internal strife. Sander says, quote, "I would have you afraid, Osirk. I would see you afraid here, before me, in this moment. I would see you realize that fear, and yet take its vast weight upon your shoulders and stand strong, resolute. I would see command humble you." Yet Osirk continues to argue with this, and they never find a satisfying resolution to their argument. Conclusion. Steven Erikson has told 3 distinct tales of a father's relationship to his child, and in so doing has presented different ways in which fathers approach the task of passing on lessons and wisdom to said children. Furthermore, Erikson has showed how the strategies used by these fathers directly impact the lessons unintentionally learned by their children, and they impact the ways in which those children grow into adults. Osirk is concerned that Sander, quote, "would seal me in wax, place me upon the highest shelf in some dusty room, to lie there like some preserved memory," end quote. Because Osirk and Sander fail to understand or respect one another, Osirk is now terrified that his father will treat him in the very same way that Koria has treated her dolls. The biggest difference, however, is that Koria is not terrified of being treated in turn as she has treated her dolls. And this is in large part because her father figure, Haut, has been honest with her, more honest even than Erethan's father was with him. All of the lessons passed on, intentionally or otherwise, have taught Osirk, Koria, and Erethan how to treat their dolls, their toys, or their playthings in the world of shifting power dynamics that they are all growing into. And the level of respect in those relationships is going to determine whether or not Osirk, Koria, and Erethan will be making positive or progressive contributions to society, or if they'll be making violent and destructive ones. Thank you. All right, that's that. 2 down, 1 to go, and then maybe many more analysis videos depending on how much energy I have. Thank you all again so much for watching this video. Even though I'm not a parent myself, I found myself really invested emotionally and really drawn to these parental relationship parts of Forge of Darkness, and I hope I've helped to shed some light on what I think Erikson was trying to do here, and to maybe highlight several points of connection, maybe interest for anyone maybe who was a little less into these particular storylines the first time through. Maybe you might be able to now go back on another read and maybe find a little more to, sink your teeth into. A few other notes to wrap up this video. I'm not sure who's responsible for the beautiful artwork I've used in the thumbnail, but if I understand correctly, this is artwork for the upcoming Subterranean Press edition of Forge of Darkness. And it is, of course, an illustration of Haut and Koria. If anyone knows more about the artist or who to credit here, please let me know down below in the comments, and I will add that information to the video's description. Also, if anyone has anything to add or argue against with this parenting theme, as always, I would love to hear from you down below in the comments. And please, if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe and share with your friends. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.